The snow was coming down in heavy sheets as I pulled my rusted Chevy pickup into the employee lot of Building 47. It was 10:45 p.m., Tuesday, February 14, 2023, and Rochester was buried under a winter storm that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. My truck's engine coughed and sputtered as it died, leaving me in the eerie quiet of the blizzard. The lot was nearly empty, just a beat-up Ford sedan and a delivery van caked in snow. Building 47 loomed ahead, a hulking mass of brick and steel, its windows dark except for the faint, sickly glow of sodium lights cutting through the storm. That I zipped up my parka, grabbed my thermos of coffee, and trudged through the snow to the employee entrance. The wind howled, carrying a low, rhythmic hum from inside the factory, like a heartbeat pulsing through the walls. I'd taken this job because I was broke. $18 an hour plus a night shift bonus was too good to pass up, even if the Indeed ad was vague. Night shift technician, no experience required, must follow protocols. I figured it was just corporate nonsense. I was wrong. Inside, the air hit me like a punch, stale, thick with the smell of oil and something sharper, like burnt chemicals or blood. The entrance led to a narrow hallway lined with lockers, their paint peeling like dead skin. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead, casting jittery shadows that made the walls seem to breathe. At the end of the hall was a desk under a flickering exit sign, manned by a wiry guy in his 50s with gray stubble and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. His name tag read Hank, Night Supervisor, you Ethan. Hank's voice was rough, like he'd smoked a pack a day for decades. He didn't look up from his clipboard. That's me. I shook snow off my boots, trying to sound confident. First night. Hank grunted and slid a laminated ID badge and a thin, yellowed pamphlet across the desk. Read this. Memorize it. Follow it. You don't, you're done. I picked up the pamphlet, its cover stained with smudges that looked like fingerprints or something darker. Building 47 Night Shift Protocols. I flipped it open, scanning the 11 rules. They read like something out of a bad horror movie: whispers, flickering lights, blurred photographs. I chuckled, thinking it was some kind of hazing for the new guy, something funny. Hank's eyes snapped up, cold and sharp. These rules are kinda weird, I said, tapping the pamphlet. This a joke for rookies? Hank leaned forward, his voice low and deadly serious. I've been here 20 years, kid. Seen people come and go. Some didn't make it to their second shift. You think it's a joke? That's your funeral. Follow the rules, or you won't see sunrise. His stare was like a blade, cutting through my smirk. I nodded, shoving the pamphlet into my pocket. All right, I'll read. You better. You're on machine 13 tonight. Maintenance check. Stay on the main floor, don't wander. Your partner's in the break room. Hank jerked his thumb toward a door down the hall. Don't screw this up. I nodded again, my confidence shaken. Hank wasn't messing around, and something about his tone made my skin crawl. I headed for the break room, the hum from the factory growing louder, vibrating in my chest like a warning. The break room was a dump, cramped, windowless, with a sagging couch and a microwave that reeked of burnt popcorn. A bulletin board was plastered with faded safety posters, their edges curling like they were trying to escape. A woman sat at the table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. She was about my age, with short black hair tucked under a baseball cap and a no-nonsense look in her eyes. Her name tag read Lila. Technician, you the new guy? She asked, eyeing me over her mug. Yeah, Ethan. I set my thermos down, forcing a half smile. You my partner? Yup. Lila Torres. She stood, shaking my hand with a grip that felt like she could break my fingers if she wanted. You read the rules yet? I pulled the pamphlet from my pocket. Skimmed. Sounds like ghost story bullshit. Her lips tightened, and her eyes darkened. Don't say that. Not here. Not at night. I raised an eyebrow. You serious? You believe this stuff? I've been here 6 months, she said, her voice low. I've seen things. You will too if you're not careful. Stick with me, do what I say, and maybe you'll last the week. Her tone stopped me from laughing. She wasn't joking, and the way she looked at me, like she was sizing up whether I'd survive, made my stomach twist. Alright, what's the deal with Machine 13? It's a chemical printer, old as dirt. Used to process film back when Kodak was king. Now it's mostly for spare parts, but it still runs sometimes. You're checking gauges, making sure it doesn't overheat. Easy work if you follow the rules. Which ones? I asked, half sarcastic. All of them, she snapped. Especially Rule 3. Don't touch the black liquid. Ever. I nodded, still not buying it. Ghost stories were for kids, not guys like me trying to pay rent. I followed Lila out of the break room, through a set of double doors, and onto the main factory floor. The factory floor was like stepping into a nightmare. It was a cavern of steel and shadow, with towering machines looming like ancient beasts. Conveyor belts snaked through the space, some humming, others silent and draped in cobwebs. The air was heavy, the hum of machinery vibrating through my bones. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced across the concrete floor like they had a mind of their own. Machine 13 stood at the far end, a monstrous thing of steel and glass, its pipes and valves glinting under the dim lights. It looked like something out of a sci-fi horror movie, all sharp edges and rusted bolts. A faint drip 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 echoed from beneath it, and the air carried that sharp, chemical smell again, now mixed with something metallic, like blood. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the factory's stink. Lila handed me a clipboard with a checklist. Check the pressure gauges every hour. If they're above 80 psi, turn the red valve counterclockwise. Don't touch anything else. I'll be at the control panel over there. She pointed to a glass booth 50 yards away, its windows streaked with grime. Got it, I said, glancing at Machine 13. A thin stream of black liquid oozed from a cracked pipe, pooling on the floor. It shimmered unnaturally, like oil but thicker, almost alive. Rule 3 flashed in my mind, do not touch the black liquid, but I brushed it off. Probably just a chemical leak. Nothing to lose my shit over. As Lila headed to the booth, I started my checks. The gauges were caked in dust, their needles twitching like they were nervous. The machine's hum was deep, almost alive, making my teeth ache. I scribbled the readings, trying to ignore the growing unease in my gut. The factory was too quiet, too still, despite the hum. It felt like the walls were watching me, waiting for something. At 11:30 p.m., the lights flickered. Once. Twice. 3 times. My heart skipped. Rule 2, if the lights flicker 3 times in a row, stand still and close your eyes for exactly 10 seconds. Do not open them early. I glanced at Lila in the booth. She was frozen, eyes closed, lips moving like she was counting. I hesitated, feeling like an idiot, then shut my eyes and started counting. 1, 2, 3, the air turned cold, a sharp, bone-deep chill that made my breath catch. Something brushed my arm, light, like a feather, but deliberate. My pulse hammered, but I kept my eyes closed. 7, 8, 9, 10. I opened my eyes. The lights were steady again, the air warmer. Lila was watching me from the booth, her face unreadable. What the hell was that? I called out, my voice echoing across the floor. Rule 2, she shouted back. Don't ask. Keep working. My skepticism was cracking. That touch wasn't my imagination. I turned back to machine 13, focusing on the gauges. The black liquid pool had grown, its edges creeping closer to my boots. I stepped back, careful not to touch it. The drip 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 was louder now, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. By midnight, the factory felt different, like it was holding its breath. The hum of machine 13 had deepened, vibrating through the floor and into my bones. I was halfway through my second round of checks when I heard it, a whisper, faint but clear, over the machine's drone. "Ethan," I froze, my heart pounding. The factory floor was empty, the shadows still. Lila was in the booth, her back to me. I checked my watch, 12:03 a.m. Rule 1, never acknowledge the whispers calling your name after midnight. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was just the wind or my tired brain playing tricks. The whisper came again, closer, like a breath against my ear. "Ethan, come here." I clenched my jaw, ignoring it, and focused on the gauges. The needle was climbing, 85 psi. Too high. I reached for the red valve, my hand shaking. As I turned it, the machine groaned, a low, guttural sound that shook the floor. The black liquid surged, splashing onto the concrete, its surface rippling like it was alive. "Careful." Lila's voice cut through the hum. She was out of the booth, jogging toward me. "Don't let it touch you." I didn't. I snapped, stepping back. The liquid stopped inches from my boots, quivering like it was pissed off. "What the hell is this stuff?" Lila's face was pale. "Don't ask. Just don't touch it. Ever." My throat went dry. I wanted to push her for answers, but the fear in her eyes stopped me. She knew something I didn't, something she wasn't ready to tell me. We went back to our tasks, the silence between us heavy, like a storm waiting to break. At 1:15 a.m., I was checking the secondary gauges when I saw it, a photograph tucked under a pipe on machine 13. It was old, edges curled and yellowed, showing a group of workers in Kodak uniforms. Their faces were blurred, like someone had smeared the ink. Rule 7, if you find a photograph with a blurred face, burn it immediately. Do not look at it for more than 3 seconds. I glanced at my watch. 1 second. 2. The faces seemed to shift, their blurred features sharpening for a split second, revealing hollow eyes and gaping mouths that looked like they were screaming. My heart slammed against my ribs. I dropped the photo, fumbling for the lighter in my pocket. My hands shook as I lit it, the flame casting jittery shadows. I held the photo over the fire, watching it curl and blacken. The air grew colder, the machine's hum rising to a scream that made my ears ring. Lila ran over, her eyes wide. "What did you do?" "Found a photo," I said, my voice shaking. "I burned it, like the rules said." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Did you look at it?" "For a second, maybe 2. "Why?" Her face went white. "You shouldn't have looked. Not even for a second." "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant it to be. "You broke Rule 7, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You looked too long." My stomach twisted. "What's it gonna do, haunt me?" Lila didn't answer. She shoved my clipboard back into my hands. "Keep working. Don't make it worse." By 2 a.m., the factory felt alive in a way I couldn't explain. The shadows moved on their own, stretching and twisting in ways that didn't match the light. I glanced toward the east wing, a dark hallway lined with rusted machinery and boarded-up doors. Rule 4, if you see a coworker in the east wing after 2 a.m., do not speak to them. Check their shadow. I saw movement, a figure stepping out from the hallway. It was Hank, his gray stubble catching the light, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I opened my mouth to call out, then stopped. His shadow was wrong, too long, too jagged, jerking and twisting like it was dancing to a different rhythm. My blood ran cold. I turned away, my heart pounding, and focused on machine 13. The black liquid was pooling again, larger now, its surface rippling like it was breathing. I could feel eyes on me, not from Hank or Lila, but from something else, something in the shadows. "Lila," I whispered, glancing at the control booth. She was gone. Panic hit me like a freight train. Rule 11, never work alone on the night shift. If you find yourself alone, you're not. Run. I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted toward the break room, my boots pounding on the concrete. The machine's hum followed me, growing louder, more insistent. The shadows closed in, their edges sharp like claws. I felt something brush my neck, cold, deliberate, like a breath. Rule 10, if you feel a cold breath on your neck, do not turn around. Walk forward slowly and hum a tune until it stops. That I started humming Happy Birthday, of all things, my voice shaky and off-key. The cold breath lingered, growing sharper, like ice seeping into my skin. I kept humming, my eyes fixed on the break room door. Lila was ahead of me, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I hadn't even seen her leave the booth that we burst into the break room, slamming the door shut. The hum stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. Lila leaned against the wall, panting. "You okay?" "No," I said, my voice trembling. "What the hell is going on here?" Lila pulled the pamphlet from her pocket and shoved it into my hands. "Read it again. Every word. You're not taking this seriously enough." I opened the pamphlet, my hands shaking. The rules stared back at me, their words heavier now, like a curse. I looked at Lila, her face pale but resolute. "We're not alone in here," she said. "And it's only going to get worse." At 3 a.m., the factory's hum changed. It wasn't just a hum anymore, it was a melody, low and mournful, like a choir singing underwater. Rule 8, the machine hum changes pitch at 4 a.m. If it sounds like singing, leave the factory floor and hide in the break room until dawn. I checked my watch. It was too early for Rule 8, but the sound was unmistakable. "Lila, you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her face grim. "It's not supposed to happen yet. Something's wrong." We grabbed our things, ready to hunker down, but as we passed machine 13 on our way back to the break room, the black liquid surged, splashing onto the floor. It formed shapes, letters, words. "Stay here." My breath caught. The liquid moved, slithering toward my boots. I jumped back, nearly tripping. "Run." Lila shouted that we sprinted for the break room, the singing growing louder, more insistent. The shadows moved with us, stretching across the walls like living things. I felt that cold breath again, sharper now, like a knife against my neck. I hummed louder, my voice cracking, until we reached the break room and slammed the door shut. The singing stopped, but the silence was worse, heavy and suffocating. Lila leaned against the wall, her breathing ragged. "You felt it, didn't you?" "Yeah," I said, my heart still racing. "What the hell is this place?" She didn't answer, just pointed at the pamphlet. "Keep that close. You're gonna need it." At 3:30 a.m., I made the mistake of checking the intercom. I don't know why I did it, curiosity, maybe, or just stupidity. The control booth had a panel with a red button labeled intercom, and I figured I'd test it, see if I could reach Hank. Rule 6, never use the intercom between 3 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. Something else will answer. I pressed the button. Static crackled, then a voice came through, not Hank's, not Lila's, not human. It was low, guttural, like gravel being ground into dust. "Ethan, why did you look?" I yanked my hand back, my heart in my throat. Lila grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with panic. What did you do? I just pressed the button, I stammered. I didn't know, you broke Rule 6, she hissed. Don't do that again. Ever. The voice came through the intercom again, unprompted. Ethan, come to the East Wing, the words slithered into my head, cold and heavy, like they were sinking into my brain. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the voice was inside me now, echoing. Lila grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Don't listen to it, she shouted. Focus on me. Stay here. I nodded, my vision blurring with panic. The voice faded, but the air felt heavier, like the factory was closing in around us. We stayed in the break room, the door locked, until the first light of dawn crept through the storm. At 6:45 a.m., Hank appeared at the break room door. The real Hank, his shadow matching his movements. Shift's over, he said, his voice gruff. You made it. Good. I didn't feel good. My hands were still shaking, my head pounding with the memory of that voice. Lila and I grabbed our things and headed for the parking lot, the snow still falling in heavy sheets. I glanced back at Building 47, its dark windows staring like eyes. The factory wasn't just a building, it was something else, something alive, and it had my name. See you tomorrow? Lila asked, her voice tired but steady. That I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to quit, to never come back. But I needed the money, and something else, a pull I couldn't explain, kept me from saying no. Yeah, I said finally. Tomorrow. As I drove away, the pamphlet sat heavy in my pocket, its rules burned into my mind. I didn't know what was waiting for me in Building 47, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't ready for it. The snow hadn't let up when I pulled into the employee lot of Building 47 at 10:40 p.m. on Wednesday, February 15, 2023. Rochester was still buried under the storm, the air thick with flakes that stung my face like needles. My hands gripped the steering wheel of my Chevy pickup, knuckles white, as I stared at the factory's looming silhouette. Its dark windows glared back, like eyes that knew I'd return despite every instinct screaming at me to run. Last night had shaken me, whispers, shadows, that damn black liquid, but I was here again. Rent was due, and that strange pull, that nagging itch in the back of my mind, wouldn't let me walk away. That I grabbed my thermos and the pamphlet, its edges already fraying from how many times I'd read it today. The 11 rules were burned into my brain, each one a warning I couldn't shake. Never acknowledge the whispers. Don't touch the black liquid. Burn the photos. I'd broken 2 rules last night, Rule 7 by looking at that cursed photograph too long, and Rule 6 by using the intercom. The memory of that voice, guttural and wrong, still clawed at my thoughts. Ethan, why did you look? I hadn't slept, not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blurred faces, their hollow eyes staring back. The employee entrance was the same, cold, stale, smelling of oil and something sharper, like blood. The fluorescent bulb in the hallway buzzed, casting jittery shadows that seemed to writhe. Hank was at the desk, his gray stubble catching the light, his eyes as sunken as ever. He didn't look up from his clipboard. You're back, he grunted, like he was surprised. Thought you'd quit after last night. Need the money, I said, my voice flatter than I meant it to be. He slid my ID badge across the desk. Machine 13 again. Lila's waiting. Don't do anything stupid. I nodded, my stomach twisting. The image of Hank's shadow, wrong, jagged, moving on its own, flashed in my mind. I hadn't told him about it. I hadn't told anyone. What was I supposed to say? That I saw something pretending to be him? I headed for the break room, the pamphlet heavy in my pocket, its rules a constant whisper in my head. Lila was in the break room, same chipped mug in her hands, same baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. She looked tired, her face paler than last night, like the factory was draining her. "You came back," she said, her voice a mix of relief and worry. "Didn't have a choice," I muttered, setting my thermos down. "You okay? You look like hell." She gave a tight smile. "Didn't sleep. You?" "Nope." I pulled out the pamphlet, holding it up. Kept reading this. Trying to figure out what the hell we're dealing with. Lila's smile faded. "Don't try to figure it out, Ethan. Just follow the rules. You broke 2 last night. You're lucky you're still here." "Lucky?" I scoffed, but my heart wasn't in it. "What happens if I break another?" She didn't answer, just stood and grabbed her clipboard. "Come on. We've got work to do." I followed her to the factory floor, the double doors creaking as we stepped into the cavern of steel and shadow. The hum of Machine 13 was already there, low and throbbing, like the factory was breathing. The air was heavier tonight, the chemical stink sharper, mixed with something rancid, like rotting meat. The fluorescent lights flickered, not 3 times, but enough to make my pulse jump. I clutched the pamphlet tighter, my lifeline in this place. Machine 13 looked worse than last night. The black liquid was pooling again, larger now, its surface shimmering with an unnatural sheen. The drip 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 was louder, more insistent, like a clock counting down. I checked the gauges, my hand steadier than last night but still trembling. The needles were at 82 psi, too high. I reached for the red valve, careful to avoid the liquid, which seemed to pulse in time with the machine's hum. Lila was at the control booth, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Keep your eyes open," she called. "Something's off tonight." "Off how?" I shouted back, turning the valve. The machine groaned, a deep, guttural sound that made the floor shake. "Just off," she said, her voice tight. "Stick to the rules." I nodded, but the unease in my gut was growing. The factory felt alive, not just watching but hunting. The shadows moved in the corners of my vision, slithering along the walls like snakes. I kept my flashlight on, its beam a small comfort against the darkness. At 12:15 a.m., the whispers started again. "Ethan," they were softer this time, almost gentle, like a lover calling from another room. "Rule 1, never acknowledge the whispers calling your name after midnight." I gritted my teeth, focusing on the gauges, but the voice was persistent, curling around my thoughts. "Ethan, come to the east wing." I glanced at Lila. She was staring at her clipboard, her lips moving silently, like she was reciting the rules to herself. I wanted to ask if she heard it, but I kept my mouth shut. Acknowledging the whispers was a mistake I wouldn't make again. The lights flickered, once, twice, 3 times. My heart stopped. Rule 2. I froze, shutting my eyes and counting. 1, 2, 3. The air grew cold, sharp, like I was standing in a freezer. Something brushed my arm again, but this time it wasn't light. It was heavy, like a hand with too many fingers, its touch wet and cold. I bit my lip to keep from screaming, counting faster. 7, 8, 9, 10. That I opened my eyes. The lights were steady, but the cold lingered, seeping into my bones. Lila was out of the booth, running toward me. "You felt it, didn't you?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking. "What the hell was that?" "Something that's been here longer than us," she said. "Keep moving. Don't stop." I nodded, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The black liquid was spreading, its edges curling like tendrils, reaching for my boots. I stepped back, my heart pounding. Rule 3 was screaming in my head, but the liquid seemed to know I was there, quivering with intent. At 1:45 a.m., I found another photograph. It was wedged between 2 pipes on Machine 13, its edges brittle and stained. The image showed a single worker in a Kodak uniform, his face blurred, but his eyes were clear, hollow, black, like pits. Rule 7. I didn't hesitate this time. I pulled out my lighter, my hand steadier now, and set the photo ablaze. The flame hissed, the air growing colder as the paper blackened. The machine's hum spiked, a shrill scream that made my ears throb. Lila was at my side in seconds. "Another one?" she asked, her voice tense. "Yeah," I said, dropping the ashes. I didn't look long. "Good," she said, but her eyes were on the ashes, like she expected them to move. "You're learning." "Learning what?" I snapped, my nerves frayed. "What are these things?" She shook her head. "Not now. Keep working." I wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped me. She was scared, and that scared me more than anything. We went back to our tasks, but the factory was different now. The hum was louder, the shadows darker, the air thick with that rancid smell. I kept my flashlight on, sweeping it across the floor, half expecting to see something staring back. At 2:30 a.m., I broke Rule 4. I didn't mean to, but it happened. I was checking the gauges when I saw movement in the east wing, a figure stepping out from the dark hallway. It was Hank, or something that looked like him, his gray stubble catching the light. His flashlight beam swung lazily, like he was patrolling. I opened my mouth to call out, then remembered Rule 4, if you see a coworker in the east wing after 2 a.m., do not speak to them. Check their shadow. I looked at his shadow. It was wrong, too long, too thin, with jagged edges that twitched like spider legs. It moved when Hank didn't, slithering across the wall like it was alive. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned away, my hands shaking, and focused on the gauges. But the figure didn't leave. I could feel it watching, its gaze heavy, like a weight on my chest. "Lila," I whispered, glancing at the booth. She was there, her back to me, but something was off. Her shadow was wrong too tall, with arms that bent at unnatural angles. My stomach dropped. Rule 11, never work alone on the night shift. If you find yourself alone, you're not. Run. I grabbed my flashlight and bolted for the break room, my boots pounding on the concrete. The hum of Machine 13 followed, growing louder, more insistent, like a heartbeat racing with mine. The shadows moved, stretching across the walls, their edges sharp like claws. I felt that cold breath again, sharper now, like a blade against my neck. Rule 10. I started humming Happy Birthday, my voice cracking, my eyes fixed on the break room door. Lila was already there, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly. "What the hell, Ethan?" she shouted as I slammed the door behind me. I saw Hank in the east wing, I gasped, my chest heaving. His shadow was wrong. "And yours?" "Don't," she cut me off, her face pale. "Don't say it. You broke Rule 4, didn't you?" "I didn't speak to him," I said, my voice shaking. "I just looked." "That's enough," she said, her eyes darting to the door. "They know you're here now." "Who's they?" I demanded, my voice rising. She didn't answer, just grabbed her clipboard and sank onto the couch. The silence was worse than the hum, heavy and suffocating, like the factory was holding its breath. At 3:15 a.m., the hum changed again. It wasn't just a melody now, it was a scream, high and piercing, like 1,000 voices trapped in metal. Rule 8, the machine hum changes pitch at 4 a.m. If it sounds like singing, leave the factory floor and hide in the break room until dawn. But it was too early, and this wasn't singing, it was agony. Lila grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." We ran for the break room, but as we passed Machine 13, the black liquid surged, splashing onto the floor. It formed words, sharp and jagged. "You looked. My heart stopped. The liquid moved, slithering toward us, its surface bubbling like it was boiling. I jumped back, but it was faster, tendrils curling toward my boots. Lila yanked me away, her nails digging into my arm. "Don't let it touch you," she screamed as we sprinted for the break room, the screams of the machine echoing in my skull. The shadows were alive now, lunging from the walls, their forms twisting into shapes that weren't human, long limbs, hollow faces, eyes that burned like embers. I felt the cold breath again, not just on my neck but everywhere, like the air itself was trying to choke me. I hummed louder, my voice breaking, until we reached the break room and slammed the door shut. The screams stopped, but the silence was worse. It wasn't empty, it was heavy, like something was waiting just outside. Lila locked the door, her hands shaking. "You broke too many rules," she whispered. "They're coming for you." "Who?" I shouted, my voice raw. "What the hell are we dealing with?" She sank onto the couch, her face ashen. "I don't know what they are. But they're old, older than this place. They were here when Kodak built the factory, maybe before. The rules keep them at bay, but you've given them an opening." I stared at her, my mind reeling. "An opening for what?" "To take you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Like they took the others." At 3:30 a.m., I heard knocking. It came from the basement, a slow, deliberate thump-thump-thump that echoed through the walls. Rule 5, the storage room in the basement is locked for a reason. If you hear knocking, ignore it. I froze, my heart pounding. Lila's eyes widened, her hand gripping the edge of the table. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't acknowledge it." The knocking grew louder, more insistent, like something was pounding with fists, or worse. The air grew colder, the rancid smell stronger, filling my lungs like poison. I clutched the pamphlet, my hands trembling, as the knocking turned into a voice, low and guttural, seeping through the walls. "Ethan, open the door." I clapped my hands over my ears, but the voice was inside me, clawing at my thoughts. Lila grabbed my arm, pulling me to the floor behind the couch. "Don't listen," she hissed. "It's not real." But it felt real. The knocking was shaking the room now, the door rattling in its frame. The shadows under the door moved, long and thin, like fingers reaching for the lock. I hummed "Happy Birthday" again, my voice barely a whisper, but the voice kept coming, louder, angrier. "Open the door." The lights flickered, 3 times. We froze, closing our eyes, counting. The cold was unbearable now, like knives in my skin. Something touched my face, wet and cold, like a tongue made of ice. I bit my lip, tasting blood, and kept counting. 10. We opened our eyes. The knocking stopped, but the shadows were still there, slithering under the door, pooling on the floor like the black liquid. Lila grabbed my hand, her grip bruising. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "We need to get to the control booth. It's safer." "Safer?" I hissed. "Nowhere in this place is safe." "It's better than here," she said, her eyes darting to the shadows. "Come on." We crept out of the break room, the factory floor darker now, the lights dimmer. Machine 13 was screaming, its hum a wail that made my head throb. The black liquid was everywhere, coating the walls, dripping from the ceiling. It formed words again, "You can't leave." I felt the cold breath on my neck, sharper now, like claws digging into my skin. I hummed, my voice barely audible, as we reached the control booth and slammed the door shut. The glass was streaked with grime, but I could see the factory floor through it. The shadows were gathering around Machine 13 now, their forms twisting into something worse, creatures with too many limbs, their bodies bent and broken, their faces hollow and eyeless. They moved like spiders, crawling across the floor, their movements jerky and wrong. "What the hell are those?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Lila didn't answer. She was staring at the control panel, where the screens were flickering, showing static, and then, an image. It was me, standing by machine 13, but my face was blurred, my eyes hollow, like the photograph I'd burned. The image shifted, showing me being dragged into the machine, my body twisting, breaking, as the black liquid swallowed me whole. That I stumbled back, my heart pounding. What is that? It's what happens if you keep breaking the rules, Lila said, her voice trembling. They show you your future. At 4 a.m., the hum stopped. The silence was deafening, but it didn't last. A new sound started, a low, guttural chant, like 1,000 voices speaking in tongues. The creatures on the factory floor were circling machine 13 now, their bodies pulsing with the black liquid, their mouths opening to reveal teeth like shards of glass. They weren't just shadows anymore, they were real, solid, their limbs stretching impossibly long, their eyes glowing red in the darkness. Lila grabbed my arm. We need to get out. Now. We ran for the employee entrance, the chant growing louder, the creature's footsteps echoing behind us. The black liquid was spreading, coating the walls, dripping from the ceiling. It formed words again, you can't leave. I felt the cold breath on my neck, sharper now, like claws digging into my skin. I hummed, my voice barely audible, as we reached the entrance. The door was locked. Lila pounded on it, her fists bloodying against the steel. Hank, she screamed. Open the door. The chant was deafening now, the creatures closing in. I turned, my flashlight beam catching their faces, hollow, eyeless, their mouths stretched wide in silent screams. The black liquid surged toward us, tendrils wrapping around my boots. I kicked free, my heart racing, and grabbed Lila's arm. We can't stay here. I shouted that we ran back toward the break room, the creature's footsteps pounding behind us. The factory was alive, the walls pulsing, the air thick with their presence. We reached the break room and slammed the door, barricading it with the couch. The creatures pounded on the door, their claws scraping, their voices chanting my name. Ethan. 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 Lila was crying now, her face streaked with tears. You broke too many rules, she whispered. They're here for you. I clutched the pamphlet, my hands shaking. The rules were all I had left, but I'd broken too many. The creatures were outside, their claws tearing at the door, their voices echoing in my skull. I didn't know what they were, but I knew one thing, they weren't letting me go. At 6:45 a.m., the pounding stopped. The chant faded, the air growing lighter. Hank opened the break room door, his shadow normal, his face grim. Shift's over, he said. You're still here. That's something. I didn't feel like it was something. My body was shaking, my mind fractured. Lila and I grabbed our things and stumbled to the parking lot, the snow still falling. I glanced back at Building 47, its windows dark, its presence heavy. It wasn't done with me. Tomorrow? Lila asked, her voice barely audible. That I didn't answer. I couldn't. The pamphlet was still in my hand, its rules a noose around my neck. I'd survived the second night, but I knew the truth. Building 47 wasn't just a factory. It was a prison, and I was its prisoner. I didn't want to go back. Every fiber of my being screamed to stay away from Building 47, to let the snow bury it and never look back. But here I was, pulling my Chevy pickup into the employee lot at 10:40 p.m. on Thursday, February 16, 2023. The Rochester blizzard hadn't relented, blanketing the city in a suffocating white silence, the kind that made you feel like the world was holding its breath. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, the pamphlet's 11 rules heavy in my pocket, its words a noose tightening with each passing night. I hadn't slept since the second shift, not after the creatures, their eyeless faces and glass-shard teeth, their guttural chants echoing, Ethan. Ethan, the image of that control screen, my blurred face twisting as the black liquid swallowed me, haunted my every waking moment. Yet I was here, driven by desperation and that cursed pull I couldn't shake. The lot was emptier than ever, just Lila's van and a rusted Toyota Corolla I didn't recognize. Building 47 loomed ahead, its brick facade swallowed by the storm, its windows dark except for the flickering sodium lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. The hum was there before I even stepped out, low and throbbing, vibrating through the snow and into my bones. I grabbed my thermos, my flashlight, and the lighter I now kept in my pocket at all times. The rules were my only shield, but I'd already broken 3, Rule 6 by using the intercom, Rule 7 by looking at that damned photo too long, and Rule 4 by staring at Hank's wrong shadow. Lila's words from last night echoed in my head, "You've given them an opening." Whoever they were, they knew my name, and they weren't letting go. The employee entrance was colder tonight, the air thick with that familiar mix of oil, chemicals, and something rancid, like rotting flesh. The fluorescent bulb in the hallway buzzed, casting shadows that slithered across the peeling lockers. Hank was at the desk, his gray stubble glinting, his eyes sunken and unreadable. He didn't look up from his clipboard, but his voice was gruffer than usual. "You're late." "Traffic," I lied, my voice hoarse. The truth was I'd sat in my truck for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself to drive away that he slid my ID badge across the desk. Machine 13. Lila's in the break room. New guy's with her. Don't screw this up. New guy? I asked, my stomach twisting. Another person in this hellhole didn't sound like good news, Hank grunted, not meeting my eyes. Yeah. Management's pushing for more bodies. Name's Marcus. Keep an eye on him. I nodded, but the unease in my gut grew heavier. A new guy meant someone else who didn't know the rules, someone who could make things worse. I headed for the break room, the hum growing louder, the factory's heartbeat syncing with my own. The break room was as grim as ever, sagging couch, burnt popcorn microwave, faded safety posters curling on the bulletin board. Lila sat at the table, her chipped mug in hand, her face pale and drawn. Across from her was a guy in his early 20s, lanky, with messy brown hair and a nervous grin. His name tag read Marcus, technician. He was sipping a Red Bull, his leg bouncing under the table like he was wired. "You Ethan?" Marcus asked, his voice too loud for the room. "Heard you're the guy to stick with." I glanced at Lila, who gave a subtle shake of her head, her eyes warning me to keep quiet. "Yeah," I said, setting my thermos down. "You the new guy?" "Marcus Reed," he said, extending a hand. His grip was sweaty, his smile forced. "Just started tonight. This place is creepy as hell, but the pay's good, right?" I didn't shake his hand. "Read the rules yet?" He laughed, pulling a crumpled pamphlet from his pocket. "This thing sounds like a haunted house gimmick. You guys take it seriously?" Lila's voice was sharp. "You will too if you want to make it to morning." Marcus's grin faltered, but he shrugged. "Sure, whatever. I'm just here to check gauges and cash a paycheck." I exchanged a look with Lila. This guy was trouble. I could feel it. "Stick with us," I said, my voice low. "Do exactly what we say." "Cool, cool," Marcus said, but his eyes were already wandering, like he was sizing up the room for an escape. I didn't trust him, and neither did Lila. "Let's go," she said, standing. Machine 13. Stay close. The factory floor was a nightmare made real. The hum of Machine 13 was louder tonight, a deep, resonant pulse that shook the concrete. The air was thick with that rancid smell, now mixed with something metallic, like blood. The fluorescent lights flickered constantly, casting shadows that moved on their own, slithering across the walls like living things. Machine 13 stood at the far end, its steel and glass glinting under the dim lights, the black liquid pooling beneath it in a shimmering, pulsating mass. The drip 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 was a metronome, counting down to something I didn't want to face. Lila handed Marcus a clipboard. Check the secondary gauges. Ethan, you've got the primaries. I'll be at the control booth. Don't wander, and don't touch the liquid. Marcus squinted at the pool of black ooze. What is that stuff? Oil? No, I said, my voice sharp. Rule 3. Don't touch it. Don't even get close. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I could tell he didn't believe me, and that scared me more than the liquid itself. I started my checks, the gauge's needles twitching like they were alive. The hum was in my bones now, vibrating through my skull, making my teeth ache. I kept my flashlight on, sweeping it across the floor, half expecting to see those creatures from last night, their eyeless faces, their spider-like limbs, their mouths full of glass. At 11:50 p.m., the lights flickered 3 times. Rule 2, if the lights flicker 3 times in a row, stand still and close your eyes for exactly 10 seconds. Do not open them early. I froze, shutting my eyes and counting. Lila was in the booth, her silhouette still, her lips moving silently. Marcus, though, didn't stop. He kept moving, his flashlight beam bouncing as he muttered, "What the hell?" Marcus. I hissed, eyes still closed. Stop. Close your eyes. What? Why? He said, his voice laced with annoyance. 7, 8, 9, 10. I opened my eyes. The lights were steady, but the air was colder, sharper, like a blade against my skin. Marcus was still moving, oblivious, checking the gauges like nothing was wrong. Lila ran out of the booth, her face pale. You didn't stop, she whispered, her eyes on Marcus. So what? He said, shrugging. Lights flicker. Big deal. You broke rule 2, she said, her voice trembling. You don't know what you've done. Marcus laughed, but it was nervous now. Come on, it's just a power surge. You guys are paranoid. I wanted to shake him, to scream that he didn't understand, but the hum of Machine 13 spiked, a shrill wail that made my ears ring. The black liquid surged, splashing onto the floor, its tendrils curling toward Marcus's boots. He jumped back, his eyes wide. What the hell is that? Don't touch it. I shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him away. The liquid quivered, its surface forming words. You moved. Marcus's face went white. Did that just spell something? Shut up and stay close, Lila snapped, her flashlight trembling in her hand. We need to keep working. But I could feel it, the factory was awake, its shadows darker, its hum angrier. Marcus's mistake had stirred something, and I knew we were all going to pay for it. At 12:30 a.m., the whispers started. Ethan, they were louder tonight, more insistent, like a chorus of voices clawing at my mind. Rule 1, never acknowledge the whispers calling your name after midnight. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the gauges, but the voices wouldn't stop. Ethan, come to the basement. Marcus froze, his flashlight beam shaking. You hear that? Don't answer, I said, my voice low. Rule 1. Ignore it. But Marcus didn't listen. Who's there? He called out, his voice echoing across the factory floor. The hum stopped. The silence was deafening, heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on us. Lila grabbed Marcus's arm, her nails digging in. What did you do? She hissed. He started, but the whispers turned into a scream, a piercing wail that made my head throb. The black liquid surged again, splashing onto the walls, forming shapes, faces, hands, eyes that stared. The shadows moved, lunging from the corners, their forms twisting into those creatures from last night, long limbs, eyeless faces, mouths full of glass. "Run!" Lila shouted. We sprinted for the break room, the creature's footsteps pounding behind us. Marcus was slower, his flashlight beam bouncing wildly, his breath ragged. The black liquid was everywhere, coating the floor, dripping from the ceiling. It formed words again. "You spoke." I felt the cold breath on my neck, sharp and deliberate, like claws digging into my skin. Rule 10. I hummed "Happy Birthday," my voice cracking, but the creatures were closer now, their claws scraping the concrete that we reached the break room, slamming the door shut. Marcus was panting, his face ashen. "What the hell are those things?" "You broke Rule 1, Lila said, her voice shaking. "You answered them." "I didn't know," he shouted, his eyes wild. "You didn't tell me it was that serious. We told you to follow the rules." I snapped, my nerves frayed. "Now they're here." The door rattled, the creatures pounding on it, their claws scraping like nails on a chalkboard. The black liquid seeped under the door, pooling on the floor, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. Marcus backed away, his flashlight beam trembling. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice breaking. "We can't," Lila said, her eyes on the liquid. "Not until dawn." At 1:45 a.m., Marcus made his fatal mistake. The pounding had stopped, the creature's chants fading, but the air was still heavy, the shadows still moving. We were huddled in the break room, the door barricaded with the couch, when Marcus started pacing. "This is bullshit," he muttered. "I'm not staying here waiting to die." "Sit down," I said, my voice low. "You're making it worse." "No, you're making it worse," he shouted, pointing at me. "You and your stupid rules. I'm getting out of here." "Marcus, don't," Lila said, her voice desperate. "You don't know what's out there." But he wasn't listening. He grabbed his flashlight and headed for the door, shoving the couch aside. "I'm going to the loading dock. There's gotta be a way out." Rule 9, do not follow the footsteps in the snow outside the loading dock. They lead somewhere you cannot return from. I lunged for him, grabbing his arm. "Don't go out there." Rule 9. He shook me off, his eyes wild. "Screw your rules. I'm not dying in this place." Before I could stop him, he yanked the door and ran into the factory. The hum spiked again, a scream that made my ears bleed. Lila grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Let him go," she whispered, "he's made his choice." But I couldn't. I followed him, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The factory floor was a nightmare, black liquid coating the walls, the creatures circling Machine 13, their eyeless faces glowing red. Marcus was ahead, sprinting for the loading dock, ignoring the whispers now screaming his name. "Marcus, follow," I kept my distance, humming to drown out the voices, but Marcus didn't. He reached the loading dock, a wide bay where the snow had piled outside, pristine and untouched. Except for one set of footsteps, leading into the darkness. They were deep, unnatural, like something heavy had dragged itself through the snow. Marcus stopped, his flashlight beam on the tracks, his breath visible in the cold. "Don't follow them." I shouted, but my voice was lost in the wind. He took one step, then another, following the tracks into the snow. The creatures were behind me now, their claws scraping, but they didn't move. They were watching, waiting. Marcus's flashlight beam grew fainter, his silhouette swallowed by the storm. Then, a scream, high-pitched, raw, like his soul was being torn apart. The snow turned black, the footsteps vanishing, and Marcus's scream cut off abruptly. That I stumbled back, my heart pounding. The creatures were chanting again, their voices echoing in my skull. "One, gone." The black liquid surged toward me, tendrils curling like fingers. I ran, humming frantically, until I reached the break room and slammed the door shut. Lila was there, her face pale, her eyes wet. "He's gone," she said, her voice flat that I nodded, my hands shaking. "He followed the footsteps." She didn't say anything, just sank onto the couch. The guilt was crushing, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I hadn't stopped him. I'd let him go, and now he was dead. The rules weren't just warnings, they were a death sentence for anyone who didn't listen. At 3 a.m., the factory was alive with horrors. The hum was a scream, the black liquid was everywhere, and the creatures were relentless. They pounded on the break room door, their claws tearing through the metal, their voices chanting my name. "Ethan, you're next." Lila and I barricaded the door, but it wouldn't hold. The shadows were inside now, slithering across the walls, their forms twisting into nightmares, creatures with too many limbs, their faces hollow, their eyes glowing red. The black liquid formed words on the floor, "Your mind." That I clutched the pamphlet, my hands trembling. "What do we do?" I whispered. "Survive," Lila said, her voice breaking. "Until dawn." But dawn felt like a lifetime away. The creatures were closer now, their claws scraping my skin, their breath cold and rancid. I hummed, my voice barely audible, but it wasn't enough. The factory was alive, its walls pulsing, its hum a scream that drowned out everything else. At 3:30 a.m., the knocking started again, from the basement. Rule 5, the storage room in the basement is locked for a reason. If you hear knocking, ignore it. But this time, it wasn't just knocking, it was a voice, low and guttural, calling my name. "Ethan, open the door." Lila grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "Don't listen," she hissed, but the voice was inside me, clawing at my thoughts. The door rattled, the shadows under it moving like fingers. The creatures were outside, their claws tearing at the walls, their chants growing louder. I felt like I was drowning, the factory closing in, its horrors suffocating me. At 4 a.m., the hum stopped. The silence was worse, heavy and oppressive, like the factory was waiting. The creatures were gone, but the black liquid was still there, pooling on the floor, its surface pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila and I sat in the break room, our backs against the wall, our flashlights trembling in our hands. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, my voice raw. "Marcus is dead. We're next." Lila didn't answer, just stared at the door. Her face was haunted, her eyes hollow, like the factory had taken something from her too. "We don't have a choice," she said finally. "We keep going, or we end up like him." But I didn't know if I could. The guilt was too heavy, the fear too overwhelming. Marcus's scream echoed in my head, his flashlight beam fading into the snow. I'd failed him, just like I was failing myself. The rules were a trap, a game I couldn't win. Every night, I broke more, and every night, the creatures got closer. At 6:45 a.m., Hank opened the break room door. His shadow was normal, his face grim. "Shift's over," he said. "Where's the new guy?" "Gone," Lila said, her voice flat. Hank didn't ask questions, just nodded like he'd heard it before. "Get out of here. You're back tomorrow." I didn't answer. Lila and I grabbed our things and stumbled to the parking lot, the snow still falling. I glanced back at Building 47, its windows dark, its presence heavy. It wasn't done with me, and I wasn't sure I could keep fighting it. "Tomorrow?" Lila asked, her voice barely audible. That I didn't answer. I couldn't. The pamphlet was still in my pocket, its rules a curse I couldn't escape. Marcus was dead, and I was breaking, my mind fractured by fear and guilt. I drove away, the factory fading in the rearview mirror, but I knew it wasn't over. Building 47 had claimed me, and whether I came back or not, it would never let me go.